Hello and welcome back to another episode of Alter Your Health Live, your source of information and inspiration to promote the holistic transformation of your health and the health of our planet. I'm your host, Dr. Benjamin Alter.
And I'm your co-host, Dr. Susanna Alter.
And today we're talking about autoimmunity again. This is our third of a series of 3 episodes that I wanted to talk about on autoimmunity. I wrote a series of 3 blog articles that kind of broke down this whole huge topic into, 3 main categories. And the first category, or the first article, we talked about really what's underneath all autoimmune diagnoses. And the second category, or I don't know why I'm calling them categories, but the second article and topic and second, podcast that we recorded last week, we talked about some of the things that we can do to combat the autoimmune, quote unquote, diagnosis. And that has a lot to do with different sort of nutritional and lifestyle tactics to support the immunity. And now we're talking about what I see as probably the most significant and the most important tool that we all have in our toolbox when it comes to healing from any condition. And, once again, we're focusing on autoimmunity, but this definitely translates into any physical health diagnosis, symptom, condition, whatever it may be.
Yeah, and this is an extremely important topic because when we consider autoimmune illnesses, I think the mind is left out of the conversation the majority of the time. And with any illness, any physical issue going on in the body, we can't just isolate the body. There has to be mental effects. There has to be an impact between the mind and the body. So
that's what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for leading us into it. We're talking about the mind and the power of the mind to heal the body. And that's really what we love talking about, the two of us. And specifically in the context of autoimmunity, it's really a powerful tool because, going back to a couple weeks ago, we talked about how autoimmune diagnoses are really nebulous and ambiguous, and the testing that we have in conventional medicine is really imprecise, inaccurate, incomplete, and we're given this kind of wastebasket diagnosis. Autoimmune diagnoses typically are syndromes. There's a bunch of symptoms, and we might have a blood test that we talked about the lack of precision with those blood tests. And all these, pieces of information come together, and then we get stuck and labeled with this autoimmune diagnosis. And a lot of people can experience a great relief, a great peace of mind when we receive an autoimmune diagnosis, because all of these mysterious symptoms are finally, given a label. And that peace of mind can be, it can be important for people to finally be heard, their symptoms are finally recognized as real, because for a long time, these people with autoimmune diagnoses and mystery illnesses, they're told that they're crazy. They're told that it's all in their head. They're told they're making this stuff up. And there's really no medical sense when it comes down to what they're experiencing. So when they're finally given a diagnosis, there can be a sense of relief, like, oh my gosh, there is something wrong. We can see it and measure it and feel it, and my doctor sees it, recognizes it, and there may or may not be a real treatment for it. So I think just for people to be heard and recognized is so important. But as we kind of talked about a couple weeks ago, these labels, these diagnoses, whether it's lupus or Hashimoto's or multiple sclerosis even, or any other diagnosis that gets an autoimmune label on it, I've been hearing, I don't know if you've heard this, but even endometriosis has become like a discussion in the autoimmune world, and endometriosis is one of the most common and underdiagnosed conditions for women, and explaining women pelvic pain and also IBS symptoms. But anyways, so these diagnoses that people receive, we make mean something, but really when it comes down to it, this diagnostic label doesn't really mean much. And that's not to say that it's not important, but we want to encourage you rather to focus on trusting something else other than just trusting your diagnosis, because it doesn't really do much good, regardless of what the diagnosis is, to allow that diagnosis to form who you are and form your beliefs. And because a lot of people, especially I've seen when it comes to autoimmune conditions, can get really tied tightly and wedded intimately with their autoimmune diagnosis. And, even on Instagram, there's a lot of people with, hashtag autoimmune warrior, hashtag, fibromyalgia thrive, fighter or whatever. And I think a lot of people really do tie tightly with their autoimmune diagnosis or any other diagnosis. And I think that one of the messages that we're hoping to convey is to just create a little bit of space between who you are, where you are, and your experience of the diagnosis. You are not your diagnosis. And that's really important for us all to recognize and embody. We are divine beings having a human experience. We know that. And we might be having an experience that is consistent with such and such symptoms that may or may not correlate with such or such diagnosis. But this experience, as is the case with all other experiences that we humans have, are ever flowing and changing. And when we can create a little bit of separation, a little bit of space between who we are, truly, our essence, and our experience in a moment, we can create that. In that space, we have the freedom to bring in fresh thought, fresh energy that can move us in the direction of health. So that's what we're going to focus on, is that fresh thought, fresh thinking that can be experienced between who you are and your label, your diagnostic label or physical symptom, and using that fresh thought to empower healing.
Yeah, because just for a minute, let's consider some of the kind of limitations that come with really identifying oneself with the diagnosis. I know in some cases when people really do latch on to that being a part of their identity, their approach to their health can kind of look like there's a dead end. Like, okay, there's only so much that I can do within this diagnosis to feel good. It's something I'm, going to have to learn to live with, and these medications will help, but that's about it. And they kind of settle in that place of that being kind of the status quo. I know for some people receiving a diagnosis, they can actually take that diagnosis and use it as motivation to really go out and seek alternative methods and help. And that can serve people to a certain extent, but at some point, if there's still that thought that this is my diagnosis for life, this is what life is going to be like forever, that in itself can be very limiting to the healing process.
Yeah. As we talked about last week, I think we did, we talked about how in the conventional system, autoimmunity and autoimmune diagnoses are seen as incurable. They're seen as conditions that we manage with, different drugs, different treatments. So that the system that sees these conditions as conditions that we simply manage, that means that we're not able to, that it is a dead end, like you were saying, Susanna. So regardless of what your doctor is telling you, whether this condition is curable or not, your condition and your experience of your illness is not a dead end. You can always transcend your diagnosis, whether you are going to completely 100% be symptom free, or be 99.9% symptom free, or maybe just 75% symptom free. You can absolutely turn your life around. You are not on a dead end street. And I think that's really important for everyone to really recognize and embody this potential that we all have. We talk about the infinite potential of human beings, and this is really what we're pointing to in this discussion is, and the same as can be said, I kind of woke up this morning on the wrong side of the bed, and in more ways than one. And, I was feeling very limited and restricted and constricted in my thinking. And Susanna kind of gently and more forcefully started to remind me of the infinite potential that we all have. And, things don't have to be as they are forever. We can turn this bus around in any moment. And really the leverage point of turning the ship is our thinking.
Yeah, and I want to speak a bit more to turning the bus around, because in my own experience of chronic joint pain and chronic fatigue, I saw so many different doctors. And I remember one of them specifically said, this is the beginning of an autoimmune disease.
I didn't know that.
Yes. And I remember, I never received a diagnosis of, rheumatoid arthritis or whatever it would have been, whatever my label would have been, because all my blood markers were normal. But they explained that there's this cross-reactivity happening in the body. It's an autoimmune process happening in the body. And so that definitely scared me. And I just, now in retrospect, kind of reflecting on that, I'm kind of wondering, okay, so like at what point do you cross that point of no return? At what point would my symptom picture be considered an autoimmune disease and therefore not reversible?
Yeah, it's very ambiguous.
It is very ambiguous. Yeah. And my experience, luckily I did come across another practitioner that said, yeah, we can heal this, before my mind really got the best of me, and I did heal it. But yeah, it just brings up that interesting question of, like, at what point does one symptom become irreversible in this conversation, in this context?
That reminds me of the power that doctors have when it comes to, in the doctor-patient relationship. A patient seeks out the help of a doctor doctor gives a diagnosis, and the diagnosis is really kind of like, it can be like a spell that the doctor is casting upon the patient, and not necessarily in a negative way. I think diagnoses are meant to be just descriptions of the symptoms, but a lot of time the patient can receive that as like a spell, like, this is it, I'm doomed, this is my fate. And like we already said, that is clearly the case oftentimes in autoimmune diagnoses, because they are just things that we manage. So we want to, whether or not you're diagnosed with an autoimmune condition, it doesn't really matter. But we want to encourage you to just not take what anyone says, including us, so darn seriously. Don't make it mean anything unless it resonates deeply with you. Trust your inner guidance, trust your inner feelings. Don't trust any words or any even blood test markers, like, especially when it comes with these ambiguous autoimmune panels that often are run. We don't necessarily need to get hung up on the data and the numbers and these kind of things. So that's really, I think, the biggest, most important thing that we all can do, that we all can take away from this conversation is just don't take what your doctor says so seriously. That doesn't mean don't listen to them. just don't make it mean the ultimate truth, because they don't know the ultimate truth. No one knows the ultimate truth. And when we make something mean something, then we just limit the possibilities that inherently always are. So we want to just take off all meaning. We want to just we want to free ourselves from those sort of rigid ways of thinking, to just give room for this infinite potential to come through.
Because one of the thoughts, one of the beliefs that really resonates with us, with me, I'll speak for myself personally, is that we learn in naturopathic medical school that the body heals itself. That's a very contradictory idea to the body attacking itself, right?
Yeah.
So as a student, we kind of had to grapple with this idea of, okay, the body heals itself, but then sometimes it turns against itself and attacks itself. How does that make sense? So, well, like we said, what really resonates with us is that the body does heal itself in every situation. When you look at it, the body heals itself. And especially when we provide exactly what the body needs to really heal optimally, when we take away the obstacles, we just let the body do what it knows what to do. The body has an innate intelligence. That's why, as a little embryo in our mother's womb, our cells know exactly what organs to form. It's the beautiful intelligence of the body. And so in a state of disease, if we really put our trust in the potential of the body, it's amazing what we can see happen.
I want to talk for a second about the placebo effect, because that's what's coming to mind for me. A lot of times in the conventional system, we do everything that not we, but the conventional practitioners, conventional doctors, the research and science world, they do everything that they can to diminish or to ignore the placebo effect, right? Which is, 50 to 60% of the time, there is a placebo effect that we can, rate and measure. So first of all, it's impossible, totally, absolutely impossible to do away with the placebo effect. And our belief is that we want to enhance and magnify and focus in on the placebo effect, because that is your body's healing. That is your body's healing with a placebo, with nothing. So we want your body to be healing with nothing. And obviously, as we talked about last week, there are so many things that we can do nutritionally to optimize the environment in your body to promote the healing. But we want to rely on that placebo effect, that innate healing force that is always moving through you. We don't want to diminish it or ignore it. We want to focus in on that and put that as the priority of the healing process, because that quote unquote placebo effect, it is your healing potential. It is your innate healing force inside of you. And
yeah, and for those more kind of scientific thinkers out there, the way that we see this work is that when the body is trusting that it's healing itself, it's automatically going to be in a state of greater relaxation. And when we're in a state of relaxation, that's when the constriction in the body and the muscles releases. It's when our hormones become more balanced. It's when the healing happens. And so it sounds like so, I guess, I don't know.
Woo-woo.
Yeah, it sounds so
totally
woo-woo, but when you actually look at the effects of what's going on in the physiology of the body, and this is starting to be studied in research, which is amazing. For example, there's studies on, the effects of what a walk in the forest does on your body, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
But it's also like very common sense. It's, it's when our body is in a state of relaxation, it heals.
Totally. And, I've got mixed feelings about all these placebo studies, because any study by nature is reductionistic in the way they run the study. They're looking at one variable. They're controlling things, and so that it's great that we're focusing our energy kind of societally on this placebo effect thing. But when it comes down to it, I think it's important to just know that it is so expansively complex and dynamic, and it's a huge, great mystery that maybe science will never totally wrap its mind around. But it's important to know that it's happening. It's happening, and we want to keep it happening at a as fast as rate as possible. And that's what we love to focus on.
Yeah.
It sounds really kind of bonkers to say, oh yeah, we use the placebo effect in our practice, but that's obviously not all we do. We don't just say, all right, here is a placebo, here is a sugar pill, take it and I'll call you in a week. We don't do that. We optimize the environment of the body, with everything that we can do scientifically, practically when it comes to our nutrition and lifestyle. And we optimize, the nutrition when it comes to our thoughts, because we're not just there's the saying that we are what we eat, but we all are also what we think. And I think that a lot of us have a low level of awareness of the thoughts that are coming through us.
It's just human nature.
It's just human nature. So as we just tune into those thoughts and realize that in any moment, our feeling state is dependent on our thinking state. And I think, and I also like to translate this from our symptoms to our feelings as well. So our symptoms are experiences in our body, pain, fatigue, anything. But we can create those symptoms with our thoughts. We can dwell on those physical sensations enough that we, exponentially increase the intensity of those kind of symptoms. And on the same notion, we can be at a party with loved ones, we can be in nature, forest bathing, and totally forget that we were totally in pain and tired. So our symptoms are ever changing as well. So I think it's important to recognize just the fluidity that the human experience is. And, once again, allow for a little bit of separation between who you are in essence and your physical condition and diagnosis, and also allow for a little bit of separation when it comes to your symptoms, your feelings, what you're experiencing in your body, and what could be, because we can let go of a lot more than we realize, I think, when it comes to our physical stuff and also mental, emotional stuff.
Certainly. Yeah.
So anything else you wanted to jam on in this episode, Dr. Suze?
I don't think so. I think we've kind of come to a sweet ending point.
Yeah. I just want to remind listeners, live and not live, because we are live on Instagram and Facebook, as we always are on Thursdays at this time, which is noon Pacific for those of you who are listening to the recording. But if you are listening in any way, shape, or form, we would just so appreciate comments, feedback, ratings, and reviews, whether it's on iTunes or YouTube or Instagram or Facebook or any platform. That feedback is really helpful and supportive to us personally. And we like to, just because we like to keep this thing moving in the right direction. And also when it comes to YouTube and iTunes and these sort of platforms, using, we like that feedback as well, because it allows our shows and our information to be seen and accessed by more people out there. And as always, if you know anyone in the world that could benefit from this sort of information, from hearing the healing vibes that we have to offer, please do feel free to share and spread the word, spread the message.
Yeah, and if you're out there listening and you are feeling like you like what you're hearing and want a little bit more support on how to really weave this into your life, we Just
That's what we do.
recently, that's what we do. And just recently, we started offering a group online coaching, which is so great. We're growing an online community of like-minded people that are working towards just living into their full potential. And we also work one-on-one with people, and we love doing both. So all of that information's on our website, which is www.alter.health. And
what more do you want to know? It's all there. So thanks so much for tuning in, and hope these messages were useful, and hope you can take away some pearls. I think, the biggest thing is just to don't take all this stuff so seriously. Don't make anything mean anything, if that makes sense. Just allow things to be, allow for some distance, some separation in your thought and your human experience, and allow for that placebo effect. It's gotten like kind of a bad reputation because it means like nothing, but allow that nothing to be something. Allow that nothing to move you towards health, because that's what's happening. Let's just focus on it and do everything that we can within our power, within our domain, in our lifestyle, to accentuate that process as well. So until next time, and until next time.
Until next time.
See ya.
Bye.
Peace and love.